Emma's hands shook as she stood in front of Riverside High School. The large brick building looked scary and unfamiliar. She had never been the new girl before, back in London. She knew everyone at her old school. Here, she knew nobody. Come on. Emma, she whispered to herself, you can do this. The 15-year-old girl took a deep breath and walked through the heavy front doors. Students were everywhere, talking and laughing with their friends. Emma felt very alone. She noticed that most of the students were white, and her dark skin made her feel like she stood out even more. Emma clutched her bag tightly against her chest. Inside were her colored pencils, sketchbook, and paint brushes. Art was the one thing that always made her feel better. When she was sad or worried, she would draw. When she was happy, she would paint. It was like her art supplies were her best friends. Her mother had told her this morning, give it time, love. You'll make friends soon. But Emma was not so sure. Making friends had never been easy for her. And being the new girl made it even harder. The first few classes were difficult. Emma sat alone at the back of each classroom. Some students looked at her with curiosity, but nobody talked to her. During lunch, she ate her sandwich by herself in the corner of the cafeteria. She watched other students laughing and sharing stories with their friends. When the lunch bell rang, Emma decided to explore the school. She walked down different hallways, looking at the notice boards and trying to find somewhere quiet to sit. Then she found it. The art room. The door was slightly open, and Emma could see easels and paintings inside. She peeked her head in and saw that the room was empty, quietly. She slipped inside and sat at a table near the window. Emma opened her sketchbook and began to draw. She drew the view from the window, trees, cars in the parking lot, and birds flying in the sky. Drawing always made her feel calm and peaceful. For the first time all day, she forgot about being nervous. That's beautiful work, said a gentle voice behind her. Emma jumped and turned around. A woman with kind eyes and grey hair was standing there, smiling at her. Oh, I'm sorry, Emma said quickly. I didn't mean to be in here without permission. Don't worry at all, the woman said. I'm Mrs. Thompson, the art teacher, and you must be Emma, our new student from London. Emma nodded, feeling her cheeks get warm. Yes, that's me. Double quotes. Mrs. Thompson walked over and looked at Emma's drawing. This is really wonderful. You have a natural talent for art. How long have you been drawing? Since I was little, Emma said quietly. My mum says I started drawing before I could write properly. That's amazing, Mrs. Thompson said. Would you like to know about our art club? We meet every Thursday after school. It's a small group of students who love art just like you do. Emma's eyes lit up for the first time all day. Really? I could join. Of course you can, Mrs. Thompson said warmly. We would love to have you. The other students are very friendly. And I think you would fit in perfectly. Emma felt a warm feeling in her chest. Maybe her mother was right. Maybe she could make friends here after all. I'd love to join, Emma said, smiling a real smile for the first time since arriving at the school. Wonderful, Mrs. Thompson said. Why don't you come by tomorrow at lunch? I can introduce you to some of the other art club members. Emma packed up her art supplies, feeling much happier than she had all day. As she walked to her next class, she thought about the art club. Maybe she would meet people who understood her love for drawing and painting. After school, Emma walked home slowly, enjoying the fresh air. She passed small shops and houses with pretty gardens. This town was different from London, but it had its own charm. When she got home, her mother was waiting in the kitchen. How was your first day, love? Her mother asked. It was better than I expected. Emma said. "I met the art teacher, and she invited me to join the art club." Her mother smiled. "That's wonderful news. I told you good things would happen." Emma went to her room and sat at her desk. She opened her sketchbook and began drawing again. This time, she drew Mrs. Thompson's kind face and the art room with all its easels and paintings as she drew. Emma felt hopeful about tomorrow. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could change everything. Mrs. Thompson's invitation had planted a seed of hope in Emma's heart, and she was excited to see what would grow from it. 3 weeks had passed since Emma first walked into Riverside High School. The art club had become her safe place, and she had made good friends there, Lucy and Ben. They always sat together at lunch now. But today Lucy was sick and Ben had a dentist appointment. Emma was eating alone again, but she did not mind as much as before. She sat at her usual table by the big window in the cafeteria. The autumn sun was shining through the glass, making everything look warm and golden. Emma had her sketchbook open. Next to her lunch tray, she was drawing the trees outside, their leaves turning beautiful shades of red and orange. Emma took a bite of her ham sandwich and continued sketching. She loved how peaceful it felt to draw during lunch. Other students were talking and laughing round her, but she was lost in her own world of art. "Hi, Emma," said a sweet voice above her. Emma looked up to see Sophie standing next to her table. Sophie was one of the most popular girls in school. She had blonde hair that was always perfectly styled and wore the most fashionable clothes. Emma had never spoken to her before, but she had seen Sophie with a group of friends many times. "Oh, hi, Sophie," Emma said, surprised. She closed her sketchbook and smiled politely. Sophie's smile was very wide, but something about it made Emma feel uneasy. "I love your hair," Sophie said, her voice sounding overly sweet. "It's so unique." Emma touched her natural hair self-consciously. She had always been proud of her beautiful dark curls. But Sophie's tone made her feel strange about it. "Thank you," Emma said quietly, not sure what else to say. "You're so talented at art," Sophie continued, still smiling that odd smile. "I've heard Mrs. Thompson talking about you. She says you're the best student she's ever had." Emma felt her cheeks get warm. "That's very kind of her to say." While Emma was looking at Sophie and feeling confused by this sudden attention, she did not notice Jessica approaching from behind. Jessica was Sophie's best friend, and she was known for being mean to students who were different. She had a small bottle in her hand, and she was moving very quietly. "I was wondering," Sophie said, speaking louder now, "if you could help me with a project sometime. I'm not very good at drawing." Emma was about to answer when she felt something cold and wet being poured on top of her head. At first, she thought someone had spilled water on her by accident, but then she felt the liquid running down through her hair, and it felt thick and sticky. "What?" Emma started to say. But then she realized what was happening. The liquid was super glue. It was already starting to harden in her hair, making her beautiful curls stick together in clumps. Emma's hand flew to her head, and she felt the sticky mess spreading through her hair. The entire cafeteria suddenly became silent. It was as if someone had turned off the volume on a television. Students stopped eating, stopped talking, and stopped moving. Everyone was staring at Emma. Emma turned round and saw Jessica standing behind her, holding an empty bottle of super glue. Jessica's face showed no emotion at all. She just stood there, looking at what she had done. "Why?" Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. Tears began to fill her eyes as she realized the full extent of what had happened. Sophie was no longer smiling. She took a step back, as if she was trying to distance herself from what had just occurred. Some of Sophie's other friends looked shocked and uncomfortable. A few students covered their mouths with their hands. Emma could feel the glue continuing to harden in her hair. She knew that this was not something that could be easily fixed. Her beautiful natural hair, which she had always loved, was now ruined. "I was just having fun," Jessica said finally, but her voice sounded hollow and mean. Emma felt like the whole world was watching her. She could hear some students whispering to each other. A few were taking out their phones, probably to record what was happening. Emma had never felt so humiliated in her entire life. Mrs. Jenkins, the lunch supervisor, finally realized what was happening and started walking quickly toward Emma's table. "What's going on here?" she called out, but Emma was frozen in her chair. She could not move, could not speak, could not think clearly. All she could do was sit there with tears streaming down her face, feeling the super glue getting harder and harder in her hair. The cruelty of what Jessica had done shocked everyone in the cafeteria, even students who barely knew. Emma felt sorry for her. This was not a harmless prank. This was deliberate and mean. Emma sat in her chair, feeling like time had stopped. The cafeteria was so quiet that she could hear her own heartbeat. Hundreds of students were staring at her, and she could feel their eyes like a heavy blanket pressing down on her shoulders. The super glue in her hair was getting harder by the second. She could feel it pulling at her scalp as it dried. Some of her beautiful curls were already stuck together in thick, sticky clumps. Emma knew that her hair would never be the same again. She heard whispers starting round the room. "Did you see what happened? That's so mean. Why would someone do that?" Some students were already taking out their phones, probably to record what would happen next or to share the story with their friends. Emma's first thought was to run. She wanted to jump up from her chair and race out of the cafeteria as fast as she could. She wanted to hide in the bathroom and cry until all her tears were gone. She wanted to call her mother and beg her to come pick her up and take her home. Her second thought was to scream. She wanted to yell at Jessica and Sophie. She wanted to tell them how cruel they were and how much they had hurt her. She wanted to make them feel as bad as she felt right now. But then something strange happened. As Emma sat there with the glue hardening in her hair, she remembered something her grandmother had told her when she was little. Her grandmother had said, "Emma, when people are mean to you, it's not really about you. It's about the pain they carry inside themselves." Emma took a deep breath. Then she took another one. Slowly, she felt a calm feeling spreading through her body. It was like a warm light was growing inside her chest, pushing away the hurt and anger. Very slowly, Emma stood up from her chair. Her legs felt shaky, but she managed to stay standing. She looked round the cafeteria at all the faces staring at her. Some students looked shocked. Others looked sad. A few looked angry on her behalf. "I want everyone to know something," Emma said. Her voice was quiet at first, but it grew stronger with each word. "What just happened to me says nothing about who I am. It only shows who they are." The cafeteria remained completely silent. Emma could see that some students were nodding their heads, agreeing with what she was saying. Mrs. Jenkins, the lunch supervisor, had stopped walking and was listening carefully. Emma turned to look directly at Jessica and Sophie. Jessica was still holding the empty glue bottle, but now she looked uncomfortable. Sophie had taken several steps back and was staring at the floor. "I'm sorry that you feel so much anger inside that you had to hurt someone else," Emma said to them. Her voice was gentle, not angry. "I hope you find peace." These words surprised everyone, including Emma herself. She had not planned to say them. They had just come from somewhere deep inside her heart. Some students in the cafeteria started to whisper again, but this time they were talking about Emma's incredible response. she's so brave." One girl said, "I could never be that calm," said a boy near the back. Emma could feel the super glue pulling at her hair as she moved, but she ignored the discomfort. She picked up her sketchbook and her lunch tray with steady hands. Then she began walking toward the exit of the cafeteria. With each step, Emma felt stronger. She had chosen to respond with grace instead of anger. She had chosen forgiveness instead of revenge. Somehow, this made her feel more powerful than she had ever felt before. As Emma walked, she held her head high. She did not try to hide her ruined hair or wipe away her tears. She walked like a queen, dignified and proud. Students moved out of her way as she passed. Some of them looked at her with respect and admiration. Emma heard one student say to his friend, "That's the bravest thing I've ever seen." When Emma reached the cafeteria doors, she paused for just a moment. She could hear the whispers behind her getting louder. Students were talking about what had happened and how she had responded, but they were not talking about her with pity or embarrassment. They were talking about her with respect. Emma pushed open the doors and walked into the hallway. She headed straight for the nurse's office, where she knew she would find help and kindness. Behind her, the cafeteria slowly came back to life, but the students were different now. They had seen something remarkable. They had watched a 15-year-old girl turn a moment of cruelty into a lesson about dignity and strength. Emma's courage had changed something in that room, and in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed it. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, everyone at Riverside High School knew about what had happened to Emma in the cafeteria. The story spread like wildfire through the hallways. Students who had been there told their friends who had missed lunch. Teachers heard about it in the staff room. Even the school secretary knew the details. But the story that spread was not just about the cruel thing that Jessica had done. It was about how Emma had responded. Students kept talking about her calm voice, her kind words, and the way she had walked out of the cafeteria with her head held high. "I can't believe how brave she was," said one student to her friend as they walked to their lockers. "If someone did that to me, I would have screamed and cried. She was like a superhero," another student said. "But instead of fighting back, she just showed everyone how to be better." By the time school ended, the story had reached social media. Students began posting about what they had witnessed. They wrote about Emma's courage and how wrong Jessica's actions had been. The posts spread quickly, and soon people from other schools were reading about what had happened. Mrs. Thompson heard about the incident when she returned from a meeting. She felt her heart break as another teacher told her what had happened to Emma. Mrs. Thompson had grown very fond of Emma over the past few weeks. She knew how sensitive and kind the girl was, and she could not imagine how hurt Emma must have felt. That evening, Mrs. Thompson called the headmaster, Mr. Williams, at home. "We need to do something about this," she said. "We cannot let this kind of behavior continue at our school." Mr. Williams agreed completely. He had already heard about the incident from several sources, and he was deeply troubled by what had happened. "I'll call an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning," he said. "We need to address this immediately." The next morning, Emma's mother, Patricia, arrived at school early. She had received a phone call from the nurse the day before, explaining what had happened. Patricia was angry and heartbroken, but she was also proud of how her daughter had handled such a difficult situation. Emma walked into school with her mother by her side. The super glue had been carefully removed from her hair the night before, but it had required cutting away several inches of her beautiful curls. Emma's hair was much shorter now, but she still held her head high. As they walked through the hallways, something amazing happened. Students began approaching Emma to talk to her. These were not just her friends from art club. These were students she had never spoken to before. "Emma, "I wanted to tell you how much I admire what you did yesterday," said a girl named Rachel from her history class. "You showed all of us what real strength looks like." A boy named Tom, who usually sat quietly in the back of their English class, came up to Emma during morning break. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday," he told her. "You changed something in our school. You've shown us that we can be better." Emma was surprised by all the attention. She had not expected so many people to approach her, but as she listened to their stories, she began to understand something important. "I used to get teased about my glasses," one student told her, "but after seeing how you handled what happened to you, I think I can be braver too," another student said. "I've been afraid to speak up when I see bullying, but you've inspired me to find my voice." Throughout the week, more and more students came to talk to Emma. They shared their own experiences of feeling different or left out. They told her about times when they had been treated unfairly because of how they looked, where they came from, or what they believed. "You've given us hope," said a girl named Mary, who had moved from Ireland the year before. "You've shown us that we don't have to let mean people change who we are." Mrs. Thompson organized a special assembly for the whole school. She stood at the front of the auditorium and spoke about kindness, acceptance, and the importance of standing up for what is right. "Emma showed us what real strength looks like," Mrs. Thompson told the gathered students. She could have responded with anger or hatred, but instead she chose grace and forgiveness. "That takes more courage than any of us can imagine." Mr. Williams met with Emma, her mother, and several teachers. He announced that Jessica would face serious consequences for her actions. The school would also be implementing new anti-bullying policies to make sure nothing like this happened again. Emma sat in the meeting and listened to all the plans being made. She realized that a terrible experience had become something much bigger than just one cruel moment. It had become a catalyst for a positive change in her school and in the hearts of her fellow students. 2 months had passed since the terrible day in the cafeteria. Emma now stood in the school library every Thursday afternoon, surrounded by a circle of chairs filled with students who had come to hear her speak. She had started a weekly support group called Rising Together for anyone who had experienced bullying or discrimination. "We cannot control what others do to us," Emma told the group of 15 students sitting round her, "but we can control how we respond, and sometimes that response can change everything." The students nodded as they listened to Emma's words. There was Sarah, a girl who had been teased about her weight. There was Ahmed, a boy who had been picked on because of his religion. There was Katie, who had been bullied because she was different from other kids. They had all come to Emma's group because they had heard about her story and wanted to learn from her strength. Emma looked round at their faces and felt proud of what they had built together. When she had first suggested starting the group, she had been nervous that nobody would come. But Mrs. Thompson had supported her idea, and Mr. Williams had given them permission to use the library every week. "I want to share something with you," Emma continued. "When that girl poured glue in my hair, I felt like my world was ending. But now I realize that moment was not an ending. It was a beginning." Emma touched her hair as she spoke. After the glue incident, she had been forced to cut her beautiful long curls much shorter. At first, she had felt sad about losing her hair, but over time, she had learned to love her new look. Her shorter hair was easier to manage, and it reminded her every day of how strong she had become. "I used to think that being different was a bad thing," Emma said to the group. "But now I know that being different is what makes us special. It is what makes us who we are." After the meeting ended, Emma walked through the school hallways toward the art room. The walls were now decorated with her artwork, and the artwork of other students from the art club. There were paintings of flowers, drawings of animals, and colorful posters with messages about kindness and acceptance. The art club had grown much larger since the incident. Students from all different backgrounds now came together every week to create and support each other. What had started as a small group of 6 students had grown to more than 20. Emma loved seeing how art brought people together, regardless of their differences. "Emma, wait up," called a voice behind her. Emma turned round to see Tom running to catch up with her. He had become one of her closest friends over the past 2 months. Tom had been shy and quiet before, but Emma's courage had inspired him to speak up more and make new friends. "I wanted to give you this," Tom said, holding out a folded piece of paper. "It's from Sophie." Emma took the paper and opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter. Sophie had written to apologize for what had happened in the cafeteria. She explained that she had been going through a difficult time at home and had taken her anger out on others. She asked for Emma's forgiveness and promised to be a better person. Emma had received the letter a week ago, and she had already decided to forgive Sophie. She knew that holding onto anger would only hurt herself. Forgiveness did not mean that what Sophie had done was okay, but it meant that Emma was choosing to let go of the pain and move forward. "Are you going to be friends with her again?" Tom asked. Emma thought about the question carefully. "I think friendship takes time to build," she said. "But I believe people can change if they really want to. I hope Sophie finds her way to becoming the person she wants to be." Jessica, the girl who had poured the glue in Emma's hair, had transferred to another school the week after the incident. Emma had heard that Jessica's parents had decided it was best for her to start fresh somewhere else. Emma hoped that Jessica would learn from what had happened and find a way to become a kinder person. As Emma walked home that evening, she thought about how much her life had changed. When she had first arrived at Riverside High School, she had felt alone and scared. She had worried about fitting in and making friends. She had been afraid of being different. Now, as she walked down the familiar streets of her new town, Emma felt surrounded by love and friendship. She had found her place in the school and in the community. She had discovered that being different was not something to hide from, but something to celebrate. Emma smiled as she realized that sometimes the most beautiful flowers really do grow from the darkest soil. Her terrible experience had become the foundation for something wonderful, though.